Hey everyone, I've got an intriguing story to share today that just might change how you think about spirituality and faith. It revolves around Kamal Farid, a young Muslim whose life took an unexpected turn after a near-death experience where he met Jesus. Trust me, you won't want to skip this one. But before we get into it, drop a comment below and tell us where you're tuning in from. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that button and turn on notifications for more amazing stories. Now let me share a bit about Kamal. He's currently 28 and spent his childhood in Maple Ridge, Iowa, which boasts a vibrant Muslim community. His upbringing was heavily influenced by deep Islamic values instilled by his family. From an early age, he was taught that the Quran contained all the truths he needed, with Islam being the one true path to salvation. Kamal's parents, Rashid and Layla, emphasized the significance of their faith, and they practiced it diligently, praying 5 times a day, observing Ramadan, and attending the mosque every Friday. This was far from mere tradition. It was the very fabric of their lives. Growing up, the idea of questioning faith felt almost impossible for Kamal. It wasn't just discouraged, it felt like a betrayal to him and his community. As a teenager, he started grappling with some doubts, and every time he dared to voice them, his dad would give him a stern look and say, "Kamal, those questions come from Nabil. Just let it go." Respecting his father's wisdom, he pushed down those unsettling thoughts. Then came college, a time of monumental change. Suddenly, Kamal found himself in a bustling mix of people, each with their own beliefs and backgrounds. It was a bit overwhelming, almost like stepping out of a black and white film into a dazzling world of color. That's where he met Ethan Blake, an Orthodox Christian who quickly became a close friend. Originally, Kamal thought his mission was to prove that Islam was the one true faith. However, Ethan turned out to be unlike anyone he had ever encountered. He listened without judgment and engaged thoughtfully in discussions, never attempting to sway Kamal's beliefs. This friendship sparked a lot of reflection in Kamal and made him reconsider many of the assumptions he had held dear. His curiosity led him to sneak peeks at the Bible, wanting to understand more about different perspectives. He was just an ordinary young man, Kamal Farid, navigating through life and its many complexities while deeply delving into the Quran on his quest for understanding. There I was, caught in a whirlwind of feelings, torn between my affection for family and community and a burgeoning curiosity about the world and my spirituality. This internal conflict set me on a path of questioning and discovery, ultimately leading to a remarkable event that would completely change my outlook. I encountered something extraordinary, a near-death experience that shattered my long-held beliefs. Let's rewind for a moment and paint the picture. It was just an ordinary day, and I was making my way home after class, my mind swirling with thoughts about Bible passages Rashid had shared with me. I was also turning over verses from the Quran, seeing them with new clarity. I was so immersed in these reflections that I didn't notice anything amiss at first. Then it struck me. Out of nowhere, an intense pain gripped my chest, feeling as if a heavy weight were crushing down on my heart. At first, I dismissed it, thinking it was just exhaustion or perhaps something I'd eaten. But when the pain intensified and breathing became a struggle, it quickly turned into panic. I glanced around, hoping to find someone who could assist me, but the street was strangely deserted. My knees gave way and I collapsed onto the sidewalk. In that moment, I remember staring up at the vast blue sky, but soon everything around me faded to black. Time lost all meaning as I drifted into unconsciousness. Suddenly, I had this surreal sensation of floating above my own body. It's an odd feeling to describe, that out-of-body experience, watching people gather around and someone desperately calling for help. It felt like I was in a movie, the scene unfolding in slow motion. Before I knew it, I found myself in an emergency room, surrounded by hurried doctors and nurses. Their frantic voices were both clear and muffled, as if I were submerged underwater. I caught a glimpse of my own body lying on the gurney, pale and lifeless, while medical staff struggled to revive me. That's when I heard the chilling words from one of the doctors, "We have no pulse." What followed was a bizarre experience. Though deemed clinically dead, my mind was buzzing with thoughts I couldn't express. I wished more than anything to call out, to alert everyone that I was still present and aware. Then an unexpected shift occurred. I felt an upward tug, as if being drawn away from the chaos of the hospital room. Everything around me began to change dramatically. The warmth enveloped me, a comforting glow that beckoned me closer, drawing me in like a soft embrace. As I approached that radiant light, a profound calm washed over me. All my worries about family, my beliefs, and the unpredictable future simply melted away. It was as if I had finally arrived home. In the center of that brilliant illumination stood a figure. It wasn't the usual portrayal of a historical character. This was a living, vibrant presence. It was Kamal, whose smile exuded an immense love, one so accepting that I felt completely vulnerable, yet utterly embraced. Although he didn't utter a single word, I grasped his message entirely. It was like a warm invitation meant just for me, assuring me that I had never been truly alone and that I had always been awaited. At that moment, all my uncertainties about faith and existence diminished into triviality. Here I was, standing before love itself, a truth so powerful that everything else faded into irrelevance. I wished I could remain in that enchanting light forever, soaking in his presence. But then, I felt a gentle prompt, reminiscent of a parent urging a sleepy child to awaken. It was as though Kamal was signaling that my earthly journey wasn't over yet. There was still a mission ahead of me. Before I could respond, a sudden sensation of falling overwhelmed me, plunging me back into my physical body. The brilliant light dulled, and that serene feeling began to slip away. In an instant, I found myself back in the emergency room, gasping for breath, utterly bewildered. The faces around me mirrored my shock, and I could just make out someone exclaiming, "It's a miracle he's back." And it was, indeed, a miracle. I had leaped from death back to life. This wasn't merely a second chance. It was a catalyst compelling me to rethink my entire understanding of God, faith, and my purpose. In the days that followed my brush with death, the hospital felt like a different world entirely. I spent a week surrounded by a dedicated team of doctors, equally astonished by my revival. They couldn't wrap their heads around how my heart had stopped for 5 minutes, and yet there I was, alive and well. In that hospital bed, I found myself lost in thought, reflecting on the surreal experience. The feeling of hovering above my body, the inviting bright light, and most importantly, encountering Kamal haunted my mind. Whenever I shut my eyes, his face emerged, and it felt as though a fragment of that divine light lingered with me, a reminder of that profound moment. The warmth and comfort of my family surrounded me, especially from my father, Kamal. He held my hand tightly, as if his grip could pull me away from the memories of where I'd just been. My mother, Layla, fluctuated between tears of joy and silent prayers of gratitude to Allah. They were relieved that I was back, but there was an unmistakable worry radiating from them, an intuition that something significant had changed within me. I felt this powerful need to express my experience, to share the feelings and visions I had with Jesus. Yet, each time I tried to speak, the words evaded me. How can anyone describe something so personal and profound? Plus, there was the nagging fear of how Kamal and Layla might react if they learned I had encountered Jesus. So for days, I chose silence, allowing them to think my quietness was simply due to fatigue or deep reflection on my brush with death. Inside, though, I was wrestling with confusion. The beliefs that had been my foundation since childhood now seemed fragile. This wasn't just a matter of picking one religion over another. It felt like I had encountered a deeper truth that transcended any structured belief system. As night fell over the hospital, I found comfort in prayer. But these weren't the standard prayers I had uttered before. They morphed into genuine conversations with God and Jesus. Questions frequently filled my mind. Why was I chosen for such a unique experience? And what was I supposed to do with this newfound insight? One night, while I was lost in thought, a nurse walked in. She must have picked up on my distress because she settled next to me and gently asked if I was okay. Before I could stop myself, the words poured out. I shared everything, the blinding light and my meeting with Jesus. Anticipating disbelief or mockery, I was taken aback by the compassion in her gaze. She took my hand softly and revealed that her sister had undergone a near-death experience years earlier. Such experiences change people, she reassured me. Don't rush to understand it all. Give it time. Her words felt like a soothing balm, making me feel seen for the first time since waking up. In the days that followed, I came to realize I wasn't alone in this. Many individuals had crossed that enigmatic boundary between our world and the unknown. I began immersing myself in research on near-death experiences, eager to uncover what others had gone through and to make sense of my own journey. In those calm moments, I would sneakily take my parents' cell phone, making sure to block the screen whenever someone entered the room. I read these touching stories from people of all sorts, and they shared experiences that felt familiar: vivid lights, deep peace, and encounters with spiritual beings. Each narrative resonated with my own, strengthening my conviction that what I had gone through wasn't just a wild fantasy or some trick of the mind caused by low oxygen, as some skeptics had suggested. No, what I had experienced felt like a true glimpse into the divine. With this newfound certainty came a heavy sense of responsibility. I realized that this remarkable insight into the afterlife had to mean something. I couldn't just return to my old habits as if nothing had changed. Something significant had happened, and I was determined to navigate this new reality. When I finally left the hospital, I understood that I wasn't just walking away as someone who had survived a heart attack. I was transformed, a person who had died and come back to life. The world looked different. Colors were brighter, sounds were sharper. It felt like I was seeing everything with fresh eyes, as if I had just stepped into a vibrant Technicolor world. I knew the road ahead would be challenging. My family's questions and my community's expectations loomed over me, but I found solace in the knowledge that I wasn't on this journey alone. The light and love I'd felt in the presence of Jesus remained with me, guiding my steps. As I returned home to Maple Ridge, everything appeared both familiar and strange. The walls, the furniture, the photos, they were all exactly as I had left them, but I was not the same. The Kamal Fareed who had walked out weeks ago was gone. At first, my parents were just relieved to have me back. They didn't seem to notice the subtle changes in me, or maybe they attributed it to the trauma I had faced. My mom, Layla, would make my favorite meals, while my dad, Ethan, spent hours by my side, sometimes in comfortable silence, sometimes sharing fond memories from my childhood. But as days turned into weeks, it became increasingly difficult to ignore the new me. Confusion and guilt swirled inside me like a tempest, leaving me to wonder how to reconcile my old life with this new reality. In the corner of my room, the prayer rug lay untouched, a reminder of rituals that used to be second nature. My approach to prayer had changed so much, it felt almost alien to me now. It wasn't that I lost my desire to pray. Rather, my understanding of its meaning took a significant turn. One sunny afternoon, my father joined me in the garden. I could see concern etched on his face. He hesitated, then finally asked, "Kamal, what's wrong? You've stopped going to the mosque, and your prayers have dwindled." I had feared this moment, but the words I needed to say seemed stuck in my throat. How could I explain feelings I was still trying to understand? Taking a deep breath, I poured out my heart. I spoke of this incredible light, that overwhelming tranquility that had washed over me, and of the vision of Jesus I had seen. As my words spilled out, I noticed his expression change from worry to astonishment and then shift to fear. When I finally finished, a thick silence filled the air. My father looked down, hands clenching tightly, and murmured, "Oh, may God protect us." I could see tears in his eyes. "Kamal, my son, you've been misled by Nabil. These visions can't be real." I had braced myself for his reaction, but it still stung. "I know it's hard, Dad," I replied, my voice shaking. "But what I experienced was more real than anything ever." He abruptly stood up, shaking his head. "I can't listen to this anymore. Let's talk to Imam Khalil. He'll know what to do." In the days that followed, our home felt like a battlefield. When my mother thought no one was watching, I would catch her wiping away tears, while my father, with a low and tense voice, made endless calls to community leaders. I felt more like a stranger in my own house. When Imam Khalil finally came over, I hoped for reassurance. He was a man I deeply respected for his wisdom, but when he dismissed my experiences as mere illusions and temptations, I felt an unbridgeable gap open between us. Amid this turmoil, my friendship with Ethan became my saving grace. He was someone I could confide in about everything that had transpired. Even though he practiced Christianity, He never tried to pressure or convert me. He simply listened, providing the support I needed. One night on campus, as we talked, I felt a strong sense of connection. It was the comfort I had been searching for amidst the chaos. Ethan opened up to me about something profound that Kamal often remarks on. Life has a way of taking unexpected turns, leading to deeper meanings. He emphasizes that it's not just about shifting beliefs, it's a journey of strengthening our connection with the divine. His perspective sparked something in me, making me realize that exploring various viewpoints didn't mean I was abandoning my roots. Instead, it enriched my understanding of spirituality. But then I faced a real puzzle. How could I communicate this shift to my family and those in my community? At home, a cloud of tension loomed larger each day. Each time I passed by our neighbors, I could feel their heavy gazes. The whispers at the mosque, oh, they stung more than I expected. Those who once embraced me felt a distance, as if I had become a stranger. One evening, following a particularly heated exchange with my father, I knew I needed to step out and clear my head. As I walked the familiar streets of Maple Ridge, a realization struck me. I was at a crossroads. I had a choice. I could suppress my experiences, retreat back to what everyone expected, or I could embrace my newfound truths, even if that meant distancing myself from those I loved. The weight of that decision pressed heavily on my heart, yet I could not dismiss the insights I had gained or the feelings that had emerged. Upon returning home, I made up my mind to share my journey, come what may. My love for my family and the community remained unshakable, but I knew I had to respect the truth I'd uncovered. I braced myself for the challenges that loomed ahead, yet the warmth of love and light around me provided comfort. Then the day came when I decided to reveal the details of my near-death experience and my meeting with Jesus. Consequences were inevitable, but I prepared myself mentally for whatever was to come. That fateful Friday arrived, with family gathered for our prayer followed by our customary meal. The environment felt thick with tension. My father barely nibbled his food, and my mother was strangely silent. Recognizing that I could no longer postpone this conversation, I took a deep breath to gather my courage. After we finished eating, I finally spoke up. Mom, Dad, we really need to talk about my time in the hospital and what I saw. Before I could continue, my father raised his hand, silencing me. With a tremor in his voice, he began, Kamal, think carefully about your next words. Consider our family. Think about the community. I inhaled sharply, fully aware of the gravity of the moment. I couldn't keep quiet because I cared too much about you. The truth is, I had an incredible experience. I met Jesus and felt his love so profoundly that everything in my life shifted in an instant. Then, out of nowhere, my father erupted. His accusations filled the house, insisting I had been led astray and had abandoned both my faith and our family. Meanwhile, my mother sat silently, tears falling onto the table. I tried my best to explain my feelings, hoping to show them that I wasn't dismissing their beliefs, but rather sharing something that had truly expanded my understanding of God. It felt as if my words barely permeated the walls of their preconceptions. Before long, our calm discussion turned into a fierce argument that dragged on into the night. When my father's words landed, they hit harder than a punch. If you continue this, Kamal, you won't have a home anymore. That remark stung deeply. I had anticipated some resistance, but I never imagined it would escalate like this. I sought comfort from my mother's gaze, hoping for understanding, but she turned away, unable to face the escalating tension. That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, replaying the painful exchange over and over. Was it wrong to express what I felt? Each time doubt crept in, I remembered the warmth and love from my encounter with Jesus, and I realized I couldn't just push that aside. The next day, I woke to a chilly atmosphere at home, reflective of my father's cold indifference. He wouldn't meet my eyes, and my mother avoided me, leaving me in an oppressive silence. I spent the day locked in my room, grappling with how everything had unraveled. Just then, a message popped up on my phone from Ethan. He wanted to check in, and feeling suffocated by the quiet, I agreed to meet him. We gathered at a cozy cafe near the university, and the moment Ethan spotted me, he could tell something was off. I poured out everything that had happened, and he listened patiently, offering words of comfort. Kamal, he said once I finished, What you're dealing with is really tough, but remember, you're not alone in this. His encouragement lifted my spirits a bit, but also reminded me of the weight of what was at stake. I was on the brink of losing my family, my community, everything that mattered to me. As days passed, the tension at home only grew worse. My father avoided addressing me, choosing instead to remain silent. In Maple Ridge, Iowa, whispers began to ripple throughout the community, and I found myself at the heart of their unease. Instead of sharing thoughts directly with me, many chose to relay their concerns through my mother. I caught snippets of conversations discussing the idea of consulting a religious figure, hoping to cleanse me of what they deemed as sinister influences. It was disheartening to think that my profound experiences could be mistaken for something harmful. As the news spread, familiar faces changed their demeanor towards me. Those who I once considered friends now viewed me with a mix of concern and pity. Some tried to guide me back onto what they insisted was the righteous path, while others felt compelled to distance themselves entirely. It felt like I was wrapped in a suffocating blanket of isolation. Just a week after that pivotal conversation on Friday, my father reached out to me. When we met, I couldn't help but notice how tired and aged he looked. He took a deep, steadying breath before asking, "Have you had time to reflect? Are you prepared to recognize your error and return to the right path?" Looking into his eyes, the eyes of my longtime hero, my heart shattered a little. I replied, "Dad, I love you. I cherish our family, and our community means the world to me. But I can't disregard what I've experienced or the truths I've uncovered." He closed his eyes, clearly pained by my words, and when he opened them again, I felt an unfamiliar chill. "So this is your choice," he said sharply. "I can't allow someone who rejects our faith to stay here. You have until tomorrow to leave." Though I had anticipated those words, they struck me like a bolt of lightning. My mother, who had been quietly watching from the doorway, gasped and hurried away, tears streaming down her face. I wanted to comfort her, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't change a thing. That night, as I packed my belongings, reality hit me like a heavy fog. Here I was, saying farewell to my family, my home, everything that had ever been familiar. Fear and doubt clawed at my insides, almost drowning me in despair. Yet, amid the chaos of my emotions, a sense of calm washed over me, reminiscent of the tranquility I felt during my near-death experience. It was as if a gentle voice reassured me, "I am with you." The next morning, I stepped outside with just a small backpack containing a few clothes and personal items. My mother wrapped her arms around me tightly at the door, whispering, "May Allah guide you back to us." Meanwhile, my father stood silently by the window, an expression of disappointment etched across his features. As I walked away, the backpack felt burdensome, but the true weight was in my heart, a heavy ache of loss. At that moment, I recognized that my life was about to change forever. The price of pursuing the truth was greater than I had ever imagined. It was a tough moment, leaving the home where I grew up. As I stepped into a new chapter of my life, I was filled with a mix of hope and fear. That familiar place transformed into an alien world. The streets of Maple Ridge, once cozy and inviting, now seemed daunting. Kamal Fareed was the first person I reached out to when I'm making this transition. When he got back to me, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. "You can stay on my couch as long as you need," he said, without hesitation. His generosity meant everything, and those early days in his home were a blend of emotions. There were moments of freedom, where I could finally embrace who I was without hiding, but then the waves of sadness would sometimes crash in. I'd find myself checking my phone constantly, longing for a call from my parents to say everything they'd heard was a misunderstanding. But the silence that greeted me was heavy, a weight I couldn't shake off. Kamal's family, however, became my sanctuary. They welcomed me wholeheartedly, never pushing their beliefs onto me or trying to mold me into something I wasn't. His mother, Layla, would often check on me during the night. Sometimes she'd sit quietly with me. Other times, she'd fill the quiet with comforting words. One night, she shared a piece of wisdom that really struck a chord with me. "Sometimes, when we face tough roads, it's to guide us towards something bigger," she said. Those words changed how I viewed my struggles. Instead of feeling like failures, They became opportunities for me to reconnect with my faith on my own terms, far removed from the strict expectations of my past. Reality soon hit me, though. I had to start thinking about finding a job and a stable place to live. Thankfully, college wasn't an immediate worry thanks to my scholarship. But the pressure to earn money started to creep in. Diving into the job search was no easy feat. Maple Ridge is a close-knit town, and word spread quickly. My situation changed the way I was treated. Places that would have welcomed me before now seemed uninviting. I could feel the stares and hear the whispers, as if saying, "Isn't that Kamal Fareed, the one with that odd dream?" Fortune favored me when I secured a position at a quaint bookstore managed by a kind older man, Mr. Fareed. He didn't judge me based on my past. Instead, he welcomed me with open arms. "If you can handle books and count cash, you're exactly what we need," he said. Before long, that charming little shop became my refuge. Surrounded by texts that explored every imaginable belief and philosophy, I found myself diving into ideas that once felt forbidden to me. It was fascinating to realize that my near-death experience was not unique. There were countless stories from different cultures and religions that echoed my own. One day, I woke up with a strong urge to start writing a diary. This diary wasn't meant for anyone else. It was a personal space for me to unravel my thoughts and feelings. I wrote about the pain of losing my family and the close-knit community I had once been a part of. While the hurt was overwhelming, putting pen to paper made it a little easier to understand my emotions. As I continued to write, a common thread emerged: my relentless pursuit of truth, along with the profound love I had felt during those transient moments that transcended this world. Over time, I began to forge connections with new friends, branching out beyond just Ethan and his family. I encountered others who had endured their own trials, some from my previous faith, while others hailed from entirely different backgrounds. Our bond was rooted in our mutual desire to explore a deeper connection with the divine, free from the confines of traditional religion. Among these new companions was Mia, a former Catholic who had her own near-death experience following a car accident. She opened the door to a support group for people like us who had walked similar paths. Attending those gatherings was rejuvenating. For the first time since my own experience, I felt truly acknowledged and understood. Yet, the journey wasn't without its struggles. There were moments when the absence of my family would crash over me like a tidal wave. Walking past our old house often stirred deep longings to see my mother in her garden or my father washing his car. Those memories led me to doubt my ability to cope with the consequences of my past decisions. One particularly difficult night, I had an incredibly vivid dream. I found myself enveloped in that same radiant light from my near-death experience, and standing there was Jesus, his smile radiating warmth. He didn't utter a word, simply wrapping his arms around me in a comforting embrace. When I awoke, tears streamed down my cheeks, but there was a newfound sense of peace blossoming in my heart. About 6 months after moving out of my parents' home, I finally found a small apartment to rent. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. The day I moved in, surrounded by bare walls and empty rooms, I felt a mix of pride and sadness wash over me. I had pieced my life back together, but it hadn't come without a cost. That evening, sitting on the floor among unpacked boxes, I opened my journal and penned the words, "The journey continues." I wasn't sure where this path would take me, but I knew I wasn't alone. The light I had experienced and the love that enveloped me would always remain. This was enough for me. As I started to settle into my new life in Maple Ridge, Iowa, a sense of calm enveloped me. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There were still many obstacles to face and relationships to mend. Yet for the first time in what felt like ages, I was content with the decisions I was making. This journey was nothing like I had planned, yet it was mine, and I was committed to see where it would lead. Then something unexpected happened. My story, a tale of a young Muslim man who almost lost everything and had a profound encounter with Jesus, began to gain traction. It all started rather innocently at one of the support group meetings for NY. I shared my experience, and it piqued the interest of a freelance journalist named Rebecca. She was intrigued and asked if she could write an article about me for a local blog. To be honest, I hesitated. I was dealing with so much pain already, and the thought of exposing my story felt overwhelming. But a small voice inside me urged me on, suggesting it could help someone else wrestling with their beliefs. So I decided to take a chance and agreed. Weeks later, when Rebecca's article went live, I was completely taken aback by the responses. People across the country started reaching out to me on social media. Some were skeptical, others wanted to explore my experiences further, and many connected with my struggles regarding faith and identity. However, one message resonated with me deeply. It was from a young man named Ahmed who lived nearby. He wrote, "Your story has inspired me to question my own beliefs for the first time. I don't feel like I'm walking this path alone anymore." Recently, I found myself reflecting on my journey, thinking about all the doubts and challenges I had faced. It struck me that my experiences held power, something that could stir conversations around faith, spirituality, and the nature of reality. This realization came to me while I was lost in thought, and I recognized that my journey was bigger than just me. Out of the blue, invites started to come my way, asking me to share my story at various gatherings and small events. The first time I received an invitation, I felt a wave of doubt wash over me. Who was I to discuss such significant matters? I didn't have the credentials of a religious leader or a scholar. I was just Kamal, a guy who had been through something remarkable and was still navigating my own understanding. However, as I began to tell my story, I noticed something remarkable. People didn't crave strict doctrines or rigid answers. They were hungry for authentic experiences. That was precisely what I had in spades. Then came an unexpected opportunity to speak at an interfaith gathering at the local university, which was buzzing with people representing diverse faiths. Walking into that auditorium, I spotted some familiar faces from my past community. It's funny how connections linger. When it was my turn to take the stage, my heart raced. The air was thick with anticipation, and while my voice shook a bit at first, I found my footing as I started to share my near-death experience and the encounter I had during that time. I made it a point to say that I wasn't there to convert anyone or to elevate one faith above another. My aim was to shed light on my personal journey and suggest that there might be something beyond what traditional religious teachings often convey. After I wrapped up, silence enveloped the audience for a moment before questions began to rain down. Some asked sharply, hinting that I had turned my back on my faith, while others approached with genuine curiosity, eager to dig deeper into my experiences. Among the crowd, an older Muslim woman caught my eye. With wisdom in her voice, she shared how her grandson had gone through a similar experience after a traumatic accident. She expressed her regret for not allowing his story to be heard, fearing backlash from the community. Her heartfelt words resonated with me. It reminded me that my journey wasn't just mine. It had the potential to create a safe place for others to voice their stories too. I realized I was challenging the silence that often surrounds spiritual experiences that don't fit neatly into traditional frameworks. My journey hasn't always been easy. Once my story started resonating with people, the backlash came quick and harsh. Out of the blue, I began receiving frightening messages on social media from radical extremists. They branded me as a threat to Islam, with some insisting I was just a Westerner out to undermine the faith. Others even suggested I was possessed. Those threats weighed heavily on me, and I often thought about retreating back to a quiet, unremarkable life. But then I remembered those individuals who found comfort in my words and the valuable conversations my story had ignited. Just when I thought about stepping back, I got an unexpected call from my mother. She had heard about my speech at the university. Her voice shook as she expressed her struggle to understand what I'd been through. "Kamal," she said, "I still pray for Allah to bring you back to the right path, but I truly admire your courage." For a brief moment, that connection lifted my spirits, making me think that maybe there was still hope to repair the relationships that seemed forever broken. As I kept sharing my narrative, invitations to speak at various events began pouring in. I tried to participate in as many radio shows and podcasts as possible, not for fame, but because I felt it was crucial to talk about challenging topics surrounding faith, spirituality, and our comprehension of reality. During one of those interviews, the host asked a compelling question. "Kamal, After all you've endured, how has your view of faith changed? I paused to gather my thoughts. Honestly, I see my faith now as a journey rather than something set in stone. I answered, it's more about embracing the vastness of the divine. I believe that no single religion holds all the answers. For me, it's about love, compassion, and striving for a richer connection with the divine, regardless of the name we choose. As those words left me, I felt a wave of peace wash over my being. My near-death experience, despite its pain and loss, had brought me a profound sense of freedom, the opportunity to explore spirituality without being confined by traditional religious structures. What's even more fulfilling is being able to help others on their spiritual journey. The twists and turns my narrative has taken were often unexpected, sometimes overwhelming, and at times even intimidating. But throughout it all, it has been an incredibly meaningful journey, one for which I am truly grateful as my story continues to unfold. During my journey into spirituality and near-death experiences, I realized that simply sharing my own story wasn't enough. I felt a deep urge to really expand my understanding of these complex topics. So I started diving into a ton of reading, everything from quantum physics to the nuances of different religions. The time I spent wandering around the library at the university opened my eyes. Each book I picked up revealed just how vast and intricate human consciousness and spiritual experiences really are. A particularly impactful read for me was Life After Life by Dr. Raymond Moody. It struck me how, while my experiences were deeply personal, they echoed similar narratives seen all around the world. I couldn't help but wonder what it meant that so many people from such varied backgrounds encountered alike experiences. This thought led me to explore the connections between near-death experiences and moments of deep spirituality found across different traditions. Descriptions of divine light and love were universal, a haunting familiarity that resonated with my own encounters. I began to see my experience as a thread in the larger tapestry of human existence. This insight fueled my curiosity, pushing me toward conferences and workshops that focused on consciousness and spirituality. At one such event, I met Dr. Anna Peterson, a leading voice in the study of death and the dying process. Her take on near-death experiences and their transformative power struck a chord. After her talk, I managed to have a brief conversation with her. When I shared a snippet of my journey, she listened intently and then smiled warmly. "Kamal," she said, "you've been given a precious gift. Use it with care, not to seek validation or to challenge others, but to illuminate and promote understanding in the world." Her words genuinely impacted me, reshaping my perspective on my role. It wasn't about convincing skeptics or validating my experiences. It was about nurturing compassion and understanding in how we perceive these profound subjects. The exploration of spirituality for me was just the tip of the iceberg. Along the way, I became fascinated with how science intertwines with spiritual understanding. I started looking into altered states of consciousness, the impact of meditation on our brains, and even how quantum physics challenges our perception of reality. One day, while I was immersed in an online lecture focused on neuroscience and its link to mystical experiences, I had a revelation. The speaker mentioned how a lab could replicate spiritual encounters using brain stimulation. A wave of anxiety hit me. Was everything I felt during those profound moments just a result of brain activity without any real spiritual significance? But then, a new idea struck me. What if neuroscience wasn't dismissing spiritual experiences, but was actually illuminating the ways we can access them? Just like a radio picks up music without creating it, perhaps our brains are the tools that connect us to deeper spiritual realms. This perspective prompted me to explore various meditative traditions. I started a daily practice, switching between Sufi techniques from Islam, mindfulness from Buddhism, and contemplative exercises from Christianity. Each brought a distinct viewpoint on the spiritual essence I had glimpsed during my near-death encounter. During one particularly profound meditation, I stumbled upon a feeling reminiscent of that earlier experience. I sensed a comforting light and immense love enveloping me. It wasn't quite as overwhelming as before, but it served as a reassuring reminder of that divine connection. Reflecting on my journey, I recognized that my near-death experience marked only the start of something much larger. This quest is not solely about exploring what exists beyond our physical realm. It also involves unpacking the complexities of reality, consciousness, and what it means to be human. Every day, I find myself uncovering more, whether through books, my meditative practices, or engaging discussions with others. It's amusing how the deeper I dive into learning, the more I realize how little I fully grasp. This has led me to an essential truth. True wisdom comes from recognizing the gaps in our knowledge. Each question I ask unearths new mysteries, which may actually be the true essence of our journey, not just to discover a final answer, but to continuously seek and wonder at the endless unknown. Throughout this adventure, it's become clear to me that knowledge and spirituality can coexist beautifully. Some friends I've met along my journey into near-death experiences and alternative spirituality have expressed worries about my tendency to overanalyze things. They suggest that perhaps I'm trying to mix science with what should remain a sacred space. Honestly, I feel that gaining insight into the brain and consciousness adds richness to the spiritual experience rather than diminishing its power. As I dive deeper into this exploration, I can't shake a nagging sense that there are still important hurdles ahead. My quest for knowledge sometimes puts me at odds with the teachings of my upbringing, creating tension both with old friends and newfound connections. Some have accused me of becoming too intellectual, insisting that I'm scrutinizing what is meant to be accepted on faith. Yet I recall the wisdom of the Sufi poet Rumi. While the lamps may differ, the light they cast is essentially the same. As I seek greater understanding, I've started scrutinizing the barriers between religions. It hit me that many of these divisions often arise from historical and political contexts, rather than true spiritual differences. This broader outlook is enlightening, but it also presents its own challenges. One evening, I found myself reflecting on my journey and jotted my thoughts in my journal. I've discovered that the biggest truths often lie not in the conclusions we reach, but in the questions we ponder. Embracing this mindset fosters a connection to a deeper wisdom. As I navigate through this spiritual and personal growth, I sense that this is merely the beginning of something even bigger. Despite the time that has passed, the longing to be with my family still lingers. There are moments when a familiar laugh or the scent of my mother's cooking hits me hard, tightening in my throat like an unshakable knot. After giving a lecture at my university, I received a call from her, and that brief chat ignited a glimmer of hope in me. Maybe, just maybe, we could begin to repair our relationship. I understood that it wouldn't be a simple task, but I committed to reaching out more. I started sending emails to my mother, keeping them light and straightforward, just snippets about college life and my job at a bookstore. I intentionally left out the details of my spiritual journey and the talks I had been giving. My goal was to gently lay the groundwork for reconnecting with her again. It was a journey full of ups and downs, especially when it came to reconnecting with my family. My dad, Kamal Farid, had been pretty quiet about things for a full 2 years after I reestablished contact with my mom, Layla. During that time, she was working behind the scenes, quietly trying to help him heal. Then came the day of Eid al-Fitr, the celebration marking the close of Ramadan. Out of the blue, I received a message from him. It was succinct and a bit formal, but it extended an invitation for dinner. My heart leaped at the thought, and I could feel my hands trembling as I quickly replied to accept. Walking back into my childhood home after all that time felt surreal, like stepping into a moment that was both familiar yet strange. When I spotted my father in the living room, he stood there looking stiff and distant. Before all this, I had started exchanging emails with Layla. At first, her replies were short, sometimes just a single line. But gradually, she began to share more about our family and updates from the neighborhood. I never directly mentioned my dad, but I'd slip in comments about how proud he'd be of my achievements. Then, about 3 years after I had moved out, an email arrived that brought tears to my eyes. It was from Layla, and she used a special nickname for me. She acknowledged that we had our differences, but she assured me I would always be her son and that her love for me was unwavering. Her words felt like a soothing balm for all the emotional wounds I had been carrying around. I quickly wrote back, expressing my love for her and sharing my deep desire to see her again. To my surprise, she agreed to meet me. We decided on a cafe situated far enough from our old neighborhood, allowing us both some space. When she walked in, my heart raced. Layla seemed older and had a worn-out look that tugged at my heart. We hugged tightly. It was a powerful, unspoken connection. The atmosphere was tense initially, filled with awkward silences and small talk. But as we spent time together, we started to dive into deeper conversations. She opened up about the struggles she faced after I left, revealing how she cried herself to sleep for weeks. "I don't fully comprehend it," she said, "but maybe I don't need to understand everything to love you." Her honesty struck a chord within me. I began reflecting on my own quest for truth and whether I had been too rigid in my thinking. Maybe love and acceptance truly mattered more than always being in agreement. From that moment forward, our meetings became a regular occurrence. Each one brought us a step closer to healing in Maple Ridge, Iowa, and it felt like we were piecing together the fragments of our relationship, one visit at a time. The evening started with a handshake that felt more obligatory than warm, hinting at the tension that lingered in the air. As dinner unfolded, it became a roller coaster of emotions. Awkward pauses were interspersed with family dynamics surfacing, drawing attention to hidden struggles. My mother tried her best to keep things light. She chatted away about the weather and updates from our neighborhood, but you could feel there was more beneath the surface. Eventually, as we neared the end of our meal, my father could no longer skirt around the subject that had been weighing on us. "Kamal," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I still don't fully understand your choices. I pray that Allah leads you back to the right path. You're my son, and I think we've spent enough time apart." His words weren't a complete endorsement, but they gave me a glimmer of hope for future discussions. From that point onward, I dedicated myself to mending our family bonds. It wasn't easy. As expected, there were intense arguments and a lot of frustration from both sides. Yet, beyond those challenging moments, we shared laughter and relived old memories. Slowly, I started to receive invitations to family gatherings again. Some relatives approached me with skepticism, while others were curious about my journey. At one family reunion, my younger cousin Rashid took me aside. "Kamal," he said hesitantly, "I have doubts about our faith too, but I'm scared to say anything. How did you find the courage?" His inquiry struck a chord. I remembered how essential it was to have open conversations, not to force anyone's beliefs, but to foster a safe environment for exploring uncertainties. As time passed, I realized that reconciliation isn't merely a destination, it's a shared journey. Years later, after reconnecting with my father, we had a dialogue that deeply resonated with me. He expressed, "Kamal, I truly believe in the essence of Islam, yet I recognize your path has evolved. You've transformed into a compassionate, thoughtful person. Maybe Allah has a greater plan for us that we can't fully comprehend right now." Hearing those words meant a lot. They symbolized the growth we had both undergone as individuals and as a family. While it wasn't complete acceptance, it acknowledged the value of my personal journey. Rebuilding my ties with family and community has been an ongoing endeavor, filled with its share of challenging days marked by misunderstandings. Despite the challenges I've faced, a deep sense of gratitude fills me for the opportunity I've been given. Along this journey, I've come to realize that authentic love transcends our differing beliefs and opinions. Sometimes, the most courageous thing we can do is reach out, acknowledging that while we might not see eye to eye, we can still care for and respect one another. This healing process has shown me that real spirituality isn't about creating divides. Rather, it's about strengthening our bonds in meaningful ways. For this understanding, I will always hold a deep appreciation.